Hey everyone, good evening. And this is the first time I'm running this Career Maps live session as part of One Life Theory. The whole idea of this One Life Theory is something that I will talk about in the first 5 minutes as an introduction. This is the quick summary of what the agenda is going to be. I'll try and, as I said, cover at least the first part by 5 p.m. so that you can carry on. And people who have more time, I'll spend the extra 10 15 minutes that we lost at the late start for any questions on this. So the idea of the overall concept of one life theory is where I will start first in terms of uh, what really is expanding on someone's potential. It's also important for me to start with a bit of my own background so that maybe some of you will be able to relate to it, maybe some of you not be able to relate to it, but I think it's important to start with that. Then I get into what actually I mean by career map, and it's sort of not as much a new concept as it is sort of a culmination of years of research and managing careers of a lot of people. The second part is to make sure that there are three, four other sort of adjoint frameworks that are also part of this career maps framework, and I'll make sure that I talk about that in a bit of detail. Next, one of the key parts to this whole mapping out your career is what is called the inherent personality traits. And there are all of us have four inherent personality traits that's based on the Carl Jung framework. And I'll just sort of give a feeler of the personality traits. Again, these are all, each of these steps can go to 1 or 2 hours if you have to sit with someone. Then this is point number four is something that you might have come across in other, research if you're extremely focused on your career. And this is the Ikigai framework, right? And this is something that's extremely popular and is out there. It is a principal part of how you arrive at the next destination of your own career map. I'll end the session with how do you actually map out what next in your career and sort of give some kind of a framework so that you can take that back. Again, the purpose of this 45 minutes, given it's a very wide audience in terms of experience levels or in terms of kind of backgrounds, is not to try and get to a career map for each of you, but is to get a feeler of what this could be in terms of when you do this for yourself. So let me get started with a bit of my introduction. A predominant part of my life has been spent in some kind of engineering, right, in terms of the last 20 years. So I graduated from IIT Madras, and this might sound like a bit of a humble brag, this particular part, but the idea is to again talk about at least my varied set of experiences. The first 10 years of my professional life was spent in corporate, starting with Infosys, where I started coding, and then went on to selling products as well as business development in Cognizant. Both of this obviously are two companies in the enterprise software world. So my first 6 years was in the enterprise software world. Then I moved to the consumer world because for me personally, a lot of my interests and passions were building products for end consumers and not just enterprises. So that's when I moved from Cognizant to Yahoo. And that was a big, change for me. This happened obviously in 2008. So 2008 to 12 was, the product experience at Yahoo. After getting product experience for me, I think creating something from scratch was always something from day one that I had given importance to. So it was but a matter of time before I started up. That happened in 2012. Uh, my sincere request, please put on mute if anyone of you is not on mute yet. Please.
Water in that bottle?
Uh, Thank you. So I think for me, the big journey from obviously employee to entrepreneur was quite a big shift. And that happened with starting Urban Ladder in 2012. This was almost 10 years back right now. And I did three things in Urban Ladder: manage tech and product, manage brand and marketing, but also very importantly, manage the people function. For me to do something like the career map, actually, I have to attribute a lot to my experience at Urban Ladder. At its peak, Urban Ladder had 1,200 people. And as head of HR, we never used to call the HR function at Urban HR. We used to call it the people function. And really, that is the time through those 5 6 years that I gained the experience of managing careers right from starting associates, people who are fresh, from B school or fresh from engineering or design school, all the way to managing the careers of leaders with 10 15 years of experience. And a lot of this career maps framework is based on that experience at Urban Ladder. Of course, today I'm a VC at Antler, and it's a natural extension of my Urban Ladder journey right now to actually be investing in companies and working with founders. It's a big privilege. Last but not the least, of course, One Life Theory itself is a hobby that I run on the weekend. But most importantly, today, spending those 4 5 hours in the weekend is really towards just building a podcast and building content. But the idea with One Life Theory is to make some of these live workshops into more persistent content and actually give frameworks for people who come across One Life Theory to use their own frameworks to build their own next steps on life, on work, on variety of aspects, right? So if you look at a lot of my experiences, it is in technology, in media, in making sure that people and founders reach their potential. Now, a lot of One Life Theory is anchored around this particular slide, right? In terms of, so any one of you who has gone through the One Life Theory workshop would have gone through this slide. But really, at any particular point in time, any of you fall in one of these five circles. I assume a lot of you or none of you fall in circle number one, which is what I call monk life, where there is absolutely no desire for pleasure or for purpose. You sort of, have no particular axis on which you're maximizing life. For all practical purposes, I don't think any 20, 30, 40-year-old, at least that I know of in this environment, is living the monk life. Um, People live one of, these other four boxes. Most people live in the center, right, which is some kind of balance between work and pleasures. Unfortunately, a lot of people live the centered life without choice, without their own will, right? It is by default that they live the centered life. But if you live the centered life by choice, then that's what is called contentment. I also assume that a lot of people who are on this particular live session do not want to live the centered life. At some level, if you're on this particular anything related to One Life Theory, you ideally want to maximize your life on one of the three other circles, which is 03, 02, or 05, right? So let me talk about these colored circles. 02 is what I call the bohemian life, which maximizes on pleasure but minimizes on purpose, which is something that you live, you're living for experiences in the world. You don't care as much about work. At least this particular one around maximizing careers is certainly not centered around people who are living the bohemian life. Again, if you're part of this workshop, I assume that you're probably not living this life. It's great if you have the ability either through monetary advantage or just a choice of life that if you want to live this life, but very few people again in this environment or based on our backgrounds are able to live the bohemian life. So a lot of people, at least in this network, are left to live either what I call the missionary life or ideally the one life. Now, the missionary life is something where a lot of your life anchors around the professional purpose of what you're attempting to do, right? Which is you spend a lot of time at work, you want to create impact, and this doesn't mean that it has to be a Mother Teresa. It could be a startup founder, it could be someone who's working in a corporate but is just so focused on work. There's nothing for or against missionary life in just that it's a choice that you have made that this particular aspect or this particular chapter of your life, you're going to be maximizing on purpose and creating impact. A lot of startup founders start their startup life in this particular quadrant where they deprioritize everything else and they just prioritize work. This means that you're spending anywhere from 60 to 90 hours a week of your active waking hours, which is 120 hours at max, of on work. And the ideal direction that people who are living this life want to move towards is one life, which is to also maximize on pleasures while you're also maximizing on purpose. A lot of career maximization of course focuses on making sure that that 60 hours or 70 hours you spend at work is maximized, and I'll come to that framework. But the whole concept of the parent concept of One Life Theory, on which this whole career map is based on, if you see these four circles, is to say that we want to help you maximize your life on all four aspects of life. Green stands for self, which is your health. It includes physical and mental health. Blue stands for work, which includes your careers, your wealth, your skills. Red stands for your social and relationships, which means your parenting, your romantic life, and your friends and family. And yellow stands for fun, right? Fun, which is travel, media, lifestyle. And if you see the logo itself of One Life Theory, it sort of goes towards the extremes. It's just to say that you should maximize on all aspects of life at any one point in time, right? So that's sort of the introduction to how all of this fits in into what I talk on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on One Life Theory itself. Of course, this is started as a podcast around 2 years back, and in the last 2 years, there's been very minimal effort that's gone into it. But in the last 3 to 6 months, we have sort of started creating more content along with my partner Tara, who's also on the call. The idea over the next 3, 6, 9 months is to sort of put out far more content on the weekends to also put out those frameworks. So the career maps framework is very specific to the career part of the One Life theory and the work part of One Life theory. So whatever I cover today in the next 35 to 40 minutes is very specific to that. Okay, so that's session one, which is an introduction to how all of this fits. So let me get to the section two, which is what the career map is, right? And today, if you look at, career map, for me, a lot of the concept here is to say none of us, none of you should look at careers as linear lines, which is, just a path, right? This whole concept of career path is a very famous one, and a lot of people talk about it, sort of moving linearly, moving, from from one milestone to another. But the whole concept of a career map is to say that the your entire career is like the world map, right? When you go visit Africa, you're not asking for some great developed nation infrastructure. When you go visit New York, you're not asking for wildlife. When you go visit the Alps, you're not asking for city life. So I think every country, every continent, in a map actually has something very special and unique about itself. And that's the concept of a career map also. When you are doing something and when you are in a particular point in your career, in a particular company, you can't, it's extremely utopian to try and maximize on every one of these 8 aspects that I have put here. But the idea is that can you get enough of a rich experience? And when you look back after 20, 30 years of your career, you actually look for a lot of varied experiences across all of these different 8 aspects, as well as you're also able to specialize and you're able to enjoy and do things far more in what is called the Ikigai, right? And I'll come to that in a bit. So, what are these 8 axes? I'll explain giving examples. So, the next slide is actually that, which is the first one is what I call location. And today, all of you, of course, because of visa issues, assume that the location for all of you is India. But today, in a very remote enabled world, you don't have to assume that. You can, I know of a lot of people who have shifted to Dubai, who have shifted to Bali, who, because of the whole opening up of remote work, are able to, actually make their lifestyle about it, to living in a different market and working remotely. It could also mean that you want to actually go get an experience in a specific market. For example, if you're in the field of tech, there's nothing that should stop you from aiming working in the valley if that's what your dream is, right? And today that's possible. So the first choice in terms of what you do or where you work is actually the physical location. Second is the industry, and by extension, the company, right? Broadly, industries can be classified into 8 or 9, very broad categories. One is manufacturing and production. This includes everything from agriculture to, energy utilities, to industrial manufacturing, to consumer manufacturing. Second is, of course, once you manufacture, you have to go sell it, which means that you could do B2C commerce, you could do B2B commerce. Third is everything services, which is hospitality, mobility, and everything around services. And of course, today technology is something very integral across the board, but I have called it out as a separate sector. Fourth is very specifically financial services that could include insurance, that could include banking, that could include payments. Fifth is healthcare. And of course, healthcare could mean manufacturing healthcare, it could mean services healthcare. Sixth is technology, it could mean consumer technology, it could mean enterprise technology. Media and entertainment is a massive industry today, and you could, build a career in media and entertainment. And the last one is, of course, governmental, right? Which is today, a lot of people also build their careers around government or research and things which are far beyond just capitalistic institutions. That's the second one, which is basically you should pick the industry that you want to work, or you're passionate about. Third is the function. Based on, of course, what your skills or what your passions are, the next choice that you make is which function that you are in. It could mean, something very specialist like product and engineering. It could mean something very specialist like marketing, or it could mean something also a bit more generic like sales or business development, or people operations or HR. And today there's a variety of these different functions, and as companies become bigger, more of these functions become more specialized. The next one is the role that you perform. The role that you perform could mean something which is individual.
नहीं यार कल नहीं होगा
or something which is individual, or something which includes managing a huge number of team members. Again, a lot of you would start your careers with something which is at an individual contributor role, and then move on to doing something which is far more managerial, right? The fifth axis is sorry. The fifth axis is uh, the stage of the company that you want to choose to be part of. Again, there are very different things, risks that get associated with early stage versus working in a big multinational corporate. And the stage also decides the sixth point, which is the kind of culture that you want to be part of. If you want a non-bureaucratic culture, you maybe swing early stage. It is not that there aren't corporates that also have a non-bureaucratic culture. It just means that you have far more responsibility. You could also pick the culture based on whether you want to be in a very tech culture, or in a very design centric culture, or you want to be in an impact centric culture. So the culture is something that again is becomes important, especially for the newer set of people who are coming into the workforce. Last but not the least is, of course, the wealth and the growth opportunities that you want out of what your experience is. And again, wealth is not just salary, it's also about bonuses, incentives, it's also about equity. And in the new Web3 world, it's also about tokens. Wealth is also about how you measure personal brand. Today, a lot of people in the work environment also optimize for quote unquote personal brand, because that they believe is important going forward. Growth opportunities could means what do you do next after this particular experience, because a lot of people also get up certain experiences for making sure that they are getting on to something else. Now, this is one axis of how you choose any of these eight particular parameters on what your, the career map is, right? And the idea is, of course, that, you land up at something which is ideal across all of these eight axes. But there are times, and most times actually, that maybe only four or five of these axes are some things that you really enjoy. And the other three axes, while you don't enjoy, you're able to put up with. Every single career where many of these are things that you don't like is where you start getting irritated, you start getting frustrated, right? So, and of course, there is no one, these are not static. Many of these are not static. Today, you might like a particular location. Tomorrow, you might like a different location. Today, you're doing a particular role. Tomorrow, you'll do a particular role. So these move as you grow in your career. These move as you age in your career. The next is, of course, how do you make some of these decisions, right? In terms of these same eight axes. So the first one is, do you want global exposure, or do you want more, specific market exposure? That is one way to look at a location. For example, do you want to be in a developed market? Do you want to be in a developing market? Is a great way to look at life. Same with industry. Do you want to be in a high growth industry? Do you want to be in an industry which is today very small, but you believe that in the next 10 years, that's going to be big? For example, the entire industry of Web3 or the entire industry of climate actually operates on this. People believe that there'll be 100 unicorns in the industry of climate and climate tech. So today, maybe there are hardly any companies focusing on climate itself. So if you are building a career for the next 10, 20 years, it just makes sense to sort of get into an industry where you believe you will be one of the earliest, but you can actually create impact and value and become a specialist. Same with respect to function. Some people choose very specialist roles because they believe they are far more focused and can grow specialists. Some people choose more generic functions because that's what they believe their strength is. Same in terms of role. Some people like people management, some people do not like people management, some people like responsibility, some people do not. And the role as well as the growth is also related to that. While the stage has some impact on fixed wealth as well as money that you make, the earlier the stage you go, the tougher it is to get high, income. But the stage is not just that; it is also about what kind of scope of impact you want. The earlier the stage you go, you're not just one small, drop in one big ocean. The later the stage you go, especially if you're younger, you're obviously going to be a drop in an ocean. People get different kind of kicks from both of this. The culture, as I already talked about, is also about making sure that you are learning and you're also experiencing a wide variety of cultures. Wealth, the moment you hit your 30s and your 40s, the immediate focus is what is retirement money and how are you going to earn retirement money at some point in life. And growth, of course, as I said, what next after this always is a topic that people think of. Now, I'm going to just pause here, just get some activity going. So I'm going to share this link here. I would love for all of you to take very small poll. Uh, tell me if the link works for you. Hopefully, it should. It's just three questions. If you can take the next 2 minutes to sort of answer these three questions. I just want to see patterns. This is anyway anonymous, so you could, your email is not getting captured here. I just would love to understand what's the de facto work satisfaction index of this gang. The moment I cross, now I see actually 22 people. So the moment I cross 15 responses, I'm going to sort of at least read out the trend line. We've crossed 5 responses. Ten. That's 12. Okay, we crossed 15 responses. So let me see what's the trend line. So very interesting, not surprising, but very interesting. There are 0 people, and it's probably to be assumed, who have a 9 or a 10 on 10, which is extremely fulfilled and satisfied on their work. A lot of you, which is pleasantly surprising, which is two-thirds of you, are in the 7 to 8. They're satisfied, but know that they can do more. A third of you are seriously contemplating some kind of a change. And it's also gratifying to see that none of you are less than 4 on 10, which means that something is extremely broken and you're extremely dissatisfied. Okay, so which is
Okay.
the one aspect that you enjoy the most in terms of what you do? By a significant gap, the biggest is actually the impact and the outcomes that you are managing, right? In terms of your own work, I think you have the most enjoyment from that. Almost an equivalent second is two things. One is your team and the manager and the culture of the place that you are at, so that's approximately 20%. The other 20% is the industry and the company that you're part of, right? Which is great. And you know what this means is basically that before you get to the brand name that you're working, 70% of it is about the impact and the outcomes you are delivering or the people that you're part of, right? Which is which is a clear indication that that's extremely, that's what's keeping so many people in the 7 to 8. Of course, which aspect of work are you least happy about? I'm not surprised by which is the number one answer here, which is one third of all the responses. That's the money or the wealth. And I'm sure the big delta between the green and the orange, which is 7 or 8 to 9 or 10, is something which is the money or the wealth that you'll get from whatever you're doing. A good close second, funnily, is also the impact and the outcomes. And maybe people feel that you're not contributing or impacting enough. Every other is 10 to 15% present, in terms of what aspect are you least happy about. And this is good. And the idea to with this whole exercise is to sort of give a flavor of where the general audience is for my own sort of research, and more importantly, just to understand as to where we need to create more content on, right? The idea with this, of course, is to extend this survey far more also on LinkedIn and get more like, a few hundred responses. So I'll be doing that. And I'll also be sending this for people that were not part of this live session. Thanks for those responses. I'm going to get back to the slide deck itself. Why the second and third have a single choice selection? It's very deliberate. I just wanted some kind of a trend line, because the moment it is multi, it just becomes, obviously there is enough distribution across, right? More people will tend to do multiple. It is about understanding what's the most significant impact. So let me get back to the deck again and try to cover the rest of the material. Okay. Thank you for your responses. That was extremely helpful. Okay. A few more concepts, right, which are in addition to this whole career maps framework. There are four concepts which have personally sort of been helpful or have been impactful for me, right? The first one is sort of what the axis of the one life theory was built on, which is to say, At any one point in time, you either optimize for the career, which is, the kind of role, the kind of, industry, the kind of company, or you maximize for your learning and your skills, because there are some times where you're sort of starting ground up in a new industry because you want to make a mark there, but you're at least optimizing for a lot of learning opportunities, or you're maximizing for wealth. Now, if you look at this triangle of career, skills, and wealth, your ideal job or your ideal career actually maximizes all three, but there may be some time to get to that. The moment you think that every single role has to maximize for all three, you're sort of losing the plot, right? Because it becomes very difficult, especially the earlier you are or the bigger the bet you're making in something new, for you to maximize on all three parts of the triangle at the same time. And a lot of people miss that, this career is built of a lot of these triangles over time. And even if you sort of let go of one aspect of this triangle, you can make up for it in the next time because you're building something which is significantly advantageous to your career. That's the first one. The second, framework, which I think was popularized by Jeff Bezos of Amazon, is the regret minimization framework, right? If today you're 25 or 35 or whatever it is, uh, and you have something which you really want to get done, right? There is no point in sort of using any kind of this, left brain framework which I have come up with, because if that's a big regret for you, you're not getting any younger in your career. So you would just rather do it. For example, if you really want to start up, you should, right? In terms of, everyone and a lot of people today in this country, there are 10,000 startups every year. But for those 10,000 startups and maybe 20,000 people making that jump, there are another 80,000 to 100,000 people who have just never made that jump, though they have been having that one thing for the last 5 years or 10 years. As much as the market is open today, a lot of people still don't make the decision, and they don't realize it today. But at some future point in time, they'll have that regret, and it might be too late to do it. Now, whether that's going to a different country, whether that's going to a different industry, whether that's trying something of your own free will, the younger you are, funnily, the less your dependencies. And a lot of people think that they have to make some level of money. But actually, if you're younger, you're able to take some of those risks because people appreciate, at least today in the Indian workforce, some of those different kind of engagements and lesser loyalties. You're trying something for every 12 to 18 months is far more appreciated today. The moment you're in your 30s, the moment you're in your 40s, you're also evaluated for more specialization, expertise, and some level of doing something really well. So it becomes tougher, trickier for you to make some of those the later you go in your careers. So that's the regret minimization framework, which is just minimize your end life regrets, which means that at any point in time, just do something you really badly want to do. The third framework, which I really like, is the one that was popularized by Alibaba founder Jack Ma, where he says, in your 20s, it's all about working with the right manager and getting a right set of experiences and learning the process to actually build stuff. In your 30s is the last decade where you can attempt to do something which is interesting, which is something that you want to try new. In your 40s, you would rather specialize because people don't look at you to try and experiment stuff. While at a very foundational level today, all of this can be challenged across the ages. I still feel that this is a great framework, based on which decade you are in your life, for you to look at what you should be doing. And in the 50s, he says that, you spend time on coaching and training youngsters who can go do stuff, whether that could be an investor, as a philanthropic initiative, or as a manager, it doesn't matter. And this I found as one of the very interesting frameworks. While in hindsight, of course, a lot of what I have done seems to have fitted this framework. It was not obviously by design. In my 20s, I worked for three managers across those three experiences where I learned a lot, but I also tried my hand a lot, both in Yahoo, Cognizant, and Infosys experiences. I started up Urban Ladder around 32, 33, and spent that good chunk of my 30s starting up. 40s, I'm sort of specializing, using whatever I have learned in the last 10 years in the Indian startup industry, using that network, using those experiences as a founder to actually groom to be a VC and invest in people. I don't know what I'll be doing in the 50s, is too far out. But I think it's sort of in hindsight, I seem to have at least followed this. The last one, which again I want to sort of leave people with because each of you is in a different state in your professional life, is what I call the ECE framework, which is the Explore, Commit, Experience framework. If you are in between things, assume that you are in the phase of exploration before you commit to something, and don't hold yourself too much in terms of this explore framework, in the explore phase, that you have to decide on something. If you give yourself 6 months or 12 months, For example, between Urban Ladder and Antler, I didn't know what I was going to do next. And it was I had given myself 12 months where I was not going to judge myself or put undue pressure on myself to make a decision to actually get that time. Now, I had the luxury after being a founder to do that. Many of you may or may not have the luxury either in terms of experiences or in terms of wealth to be able to do it. But today, far more than ever before, that entire period of exploration is something that people are absolutely proud of putting on LinkedIn, right? You, in the phase of exploration, you talk to a wide variety of people, you explore a wide variety of stuff, and sometimes you come by selection, sometimes you come by elimination, and both approaches are absolutely fine. I'll talk about this later in the last step, which is the how do you get to the next phase. But this is something that you have to be aware. If you're in the explore phase, do things which are more keen towards exploration, which means try a few things, try a few projects, work, network with a few people, all of that stuff, right? If you're in the commit phase, which means that you're making a decision, make sure that you commit and with a very clear, without any FOMO, without any sort of, oh shit, what if I had made the other decision? Always when you make a decision, especially when you have more options or opportunities, you're going to give up, quote unquote, something. You can always get back to the other thing, but commit with some level of criteria and decision making. And the moment you commit, you be ready for experiencing what it is instead of trying to see what else you can do, right? I would say a good young strong career is anywhere in that 1.5 to 3 years time period. If you're slightly more senior, maybe that is in the 3 to 5 years, because your leadership and your impact also takes more time. So if you're in your 30s or 40s, maybe give at least a good 3 to 5 years on something. If you're in your 20s, maybe give a good 18 to 24 months on something, and then you can take a call on what next after that, right? That is the correct phase probably for experiencing or going full on into something that you have committed. When you're in the experience zone, then don't keep looking for other opportunities. Don't be always in the market trying to do something new, because unless you go through some level of up and down in a particular experience, I personally don't see you, having that ability to take something to a new scale, or having seen that up and down to be able to go do something of phenomenal importance later. A lot of people today are looking at careers as 1.5 to 2 year jumps, or even lesser. And that kind of a career, while it might maximize on your pay, it might not give you the right set of experiences that can maximize your entire potential in terms of impact. So these are, sort of additional concepts. This is not any kind of a framework as much as just additional four concepts in addition to the career map framework. I'll, move on to the next step, which is, and this probably is the most complicated, but by inherent extension, I can't spend more than 5 minutes, because I would do disservice to it if I spend any more time, right? I need like a literal proper 1 hour on this. So this actually is an assessment, and this is something that I've been using both at Antler, for the team as well as for founders. And over the last 120 times when I have sort of had one-on-one conversations and done this assessment, it's come out extremely useful from the people's perspective. This is based on the Carl Jung very foundational behavior and framework. And every one of us typically has one primary personality and one secondary personality. By the time you're between 20 and 25, this sort of starts getting set. And every experience from then on either builds on your strength or tries to plug some of your weaknesses, right? Now, the first personality here is something called a thinker. A thinker is very structured, extremely logical, very rational, puts a lot of pros and cons, and is very good in just thinking through problem statements. By inherent nature, they also get into analysis paralysis. They're overly methodical and overly structured, that sometimes action might actually be a problem. Now, this thinker personality typically, ends up in consulting, might end up in banking, might end up in strategy. And this thinker personality is one of the, four foundational personality traits. The second personality is that of a feeler. The feeler personality is someone who builds trust with people. They love human interaction. They love sort of being empathetic to people around them. Uh, Now, unfortunately, the other side to being a feeler is you sort of act too much on feelings, or you're not giving your thinking ability as much. At some level, the thinker and feeler are on two different ends of the spectrum. While they're on two different ends of the spectrum, there are a lot of people that I know who have both thinker and feeler, and it is possible to be a feeler, comma thinker. Less so, but it is possible to be that. The feelers do well in customer service, do well maybe in retail, do well sometimes in sales, do well extremely well in HR and roles which are similar to where you're engaging and interacting with people. Feelers on the other side also find it very difficult to take hard people decisions. The third personality is that of an intuitor. The intuitor is the dreamer, is the visionary, is able to sort of, they're full of ideas, they're full of brainstorming, they're able to sell a story. They're extremely charismatic. They are long on vision, short on details. They also, because of being an inherent intuitor, you might not be so great at implementing things. You might not be so great at structuring things because you might, talk airy fairy, but you might not actually implement stuff. Intuitors are great at sales. Intuitors are also great at sort of being visionary founders because they're able to sell a story. Intuitors are also very good. There are enough big leaders who have been great intuitors because they're able to dream of the future. The other hand, on the balance of intuitor, is that of a sensor. A lot of founders have a very strong sensory attribute too. The sensors are here and now and they're extremely action oriented. The bias for action is very high. Uh, because of the bias for action being very high, they're very impatient for results and very pragmatic about the way, they just need to see action literally every day, right? Because they overemphasize on the short term results, they also have a challenge of taking a step back and seeing the larger picture. They also might act impulsively or they might get impatient in terms of just results, that they may compromise on being more people empathetic or having a longer vision. Now, the idea with each of these four personality traits doesn't mean that any one is better than the other. Every single human being here on this call, as well as a lot of people that I've interacted with, have usually one strong primary personality amongst these four and one strong secondary personality amongst these four. With a varied set of experiences, what might become fall points for you based on your two primary means you have two weaker personalities, right? It is possible to mask or to build capabilities in those fall points. And what this essentially means is, based on your primary personalities and the personality type, you are probably better fit for certain functions or certain kind of industries. Again, this doesn't mean that you have to take this too seriously that you can't fix something. It just means that if you have certain inherent strengths, you might as well align your careers around those particular personality traits. Again, as I said, unfortunately, in a 45-50 minute workshop, there's only so much level of detail I can get into. But this is one of the core foundational frameworks I believe very strongly that we don't do enough justice to in assessing people right after their college in their early 20s, so that we can give, this, I believe very strongly, should be a big part of career counseling in terms of, based on primary personality traits, there's a higher chance of success on certain kind of roles or certain kind of industries. So this is one which I will leave you with. The next topic is probably the one that most people would have come across in other research, which is what is called the professional ikigai, right? Now, I have certain small iterations to this, so that's why I call this a professional ikigai plus plus, which is uh, in addition to how you arrive at what next, it is also extremely important for you to understand as to what are the things that are maybe stopping you from achieving your potential. So the four circles that make up this professional ikigai, the first circle, and a lot of people come from, in different orders, but I choose to go from this order, which is one, what does the world need? Now, what does the world need? People sort of somewhere implicitly may not give that enough weightage, but the moment you start from that, you actually look at in the career map framework, you start looking at it from the location and the industry perspective. If you believe that climate is important, if you believe mental health is important, if you believe that manufacturing and sustainable manufacturing is important, or if you believe that you want to go in the impact field, I think that's where you start, that you want to build a career in a particular industry or in a particular space. Then next, so now I'm going to come from the pink to the yellow to the green and then to the blue, right? What you are passionate about there. Now, of course, what you're passionate about could be what is the kind of stuff that you want to do, what are the areas that you really love doing. It could be a functional advantage, it could be to interact with people, it could be to go sell stuff, it could be to go code. Whatever it is that you love doing, you should put that out. After you do that, then you should also look at, okay, maybe you don't love doing something, but you're probably good at something, right? And I'll talk about this personally just to give an example of how I arrived at having to do, VC, right, between Urban Ladder and now, right? What you're good at, you'd be surprised sometimes this yellow and green do not actually match, right? You might love doing something, but you might actually not be good at it, or vice versa. It is important to see where you've actually gained success. The last part is what you get paid for. And a lot of people start from the blue circle, blue, green, yellow, and then, red. When you graduate out of college, you probably don't even choose. Everyone goes for an investment banking job or everyone goes for a consulting job, which is maximized on what is the blue. Then you get good at it because, you're paid a lot and you're trained a lot. So you become good at it. By becoming good at it, you start loving it. And then you hope that whatever you're doing, it is of impact to the world. I have nothing against going from blue, green, yellow, red, but if you have a choice, I would always recommend going red, yellow, green, and blue. Uh, the ideal job and the ideal career for you is at any one point in time, you are bang in the middle of those four circles, right? And the more you're able to, give more character and detail to this, the easier it is for you to land at that deep green, olive green. As I said earlier, it doesn't mean that you have to land the olive green. It could mean that you land the orange, or it could mean that you land the green, which means that you're optimizing only for two circles. Because, as I said, it's not sometimes possible for you to maximize on all of these different circles or all of these different choices. There are three additional points that I would leave with in terms of Ikigai. One, it is extremely important that you have the self-awareness. When I say self-awareness, the younger you are, probably you take feedback from your manager, from your peers. The older you are, you probably know this yourself. What are the basic behaviors or the skills that you're lacking, which are stopping you from reaching your full potential, right? A lot of you gave yourself 7 or 8 on the scale of 10. One of two reasons. One is maybe you're not hitting your outcomes or your wealth, but the other could be that you probably are not maybe able to cross some kind of a ceiling you have set for yourself. And maybe there are certain behaviors or there are certain things that you have to do which has to break that ceiling, right? So that's the first one. Second, which might actually yield some interesting results, is who are your role models? These role models could be someone in your company, it could be some public figure. Why are they your role models? Is it because the kind of impact? Maybe someone, Bill Gates is the role model. Maybe someone, it's I don't know, Elon Musk is the role model. But why is it that they are your role model? Is it because they're working on sustainable sectors? Is it because someone is a philanthropist? Is it because they just, or is it just because of the wealth, right? The more you break this down in terms of who your role models, it could be a manager, it could be someone in your company, it could be your own peer, maybe someone in the way they interact, in the way they're able to build a people culture, in the way they're calm, amidst a lot of things going haywire. Whatever it is your role model, you have to list down what is that one thing about the role model that you really, that makes them your role model. The more you're able to do this at a very next level detail, you will actually be able to put forth as to what are the things that are important to you personally. The last is, assume that this is not a one time exercise. This is not something that you do one time and everything lands. You've finalized what your olive green thing is, and that's what's going to be for the next 10, 20, 30 years. It never happens that way. You move from Ikigai to Ikigai. In the first maybe 5, 7 years, you arrived at an Ikigai. 2 cycles, 3 cycles out, your Ikigai might be something completely different from where you arrived, at the start, right? For me personally, maybe at the start, a lot of what I was optimizing on was just coding and providing software solutions. When I moved to Yahoo, it was about doing that in the consumer world. When I went to Urban Ladder, it was about creating an institution and a company and a culture and bringing people together. And today, as a VC, it is about getting resources to enable founders to create institutions, right? So it's certainly evolved from just individually writing code all the way. Now, I just used to be a nerd and I could write code for maybe 18 hours every day. That has graduated to something extremely different after 2 decades of work. But that's sort of the evolution of what that, olive green Ikigai is for each of you. I'm getting close to the hour mark, so we have 15 more minutes max. And the last step of this is actually arriving at what's the next destination in your own career map, right? The whole point of the first three, exercises that I went through is to arrive at this particular map, right? And this is, it's obviously a blank sheet, and this is what you probably would take out. Every one of you in each of these 8 rows could have different levels of flexibility. Someone is very particular on a particular axis. Someone is extremely flexible. For example, maybe you're very tight, you're very location constrained. Or maybe you're absolutely not location constrained, but you only want to work in the mobility industry or in the Web3 industry. You are based on your education, and the more you're educated, the more number three is already decided for you, right? It becomes, three is the one that becomes the toughest to actually move between, functions. On almost every other thing, if you look at your career, you can actually move across a variety of stuff, right? So when you build what next for yourself, what is important is you fill this sheet. You fill this sheet in a way which talks about what is the one where you have flexibility and what is the one where you don't have flexibility, and mark out as to what this should be for you for the next 3 5 years. As I said, maybe it's 18 to 36 months if you're younger, maybe it's 36 to 60 months if you're older, right? Anywhere from 3 to 5 years or 1 to 3 years, 1.5 to 3 years. You then put out as to what that thing is in terms of maximizing. Now, that's not enough, right? Steps 1 to 8 will give you a good indication, but it is actually about what you do in step 9 and 10, which is what is going to land you with what next for you, right? As I said, the whole idea of a very rich career map is to make sure, at the end of the day, you want to have traveled the world, right? When I say travel the world, you should have had a variety of experiences across different sectors, different kind of cultures, maybe different locations, ideally, if you have no visa problem, or different kinds of functions too. And the only way that's possible is the younger you are, the more you're able to do some of this, right? The older you get, as I said, it becomes tougher. So, what are those one time decisions that you have to do to be able to get to that? For example, maybe you have to undergo some kind of a training. Maybe you have to undergo some kind of an education or a re education to even be able to be eligible for something like this. Maybe you have to do some kind of an environment setting in terms of maybe, just making sure that you are just not in this particular job or in a particular kind of a location or a setting. And last but not the least, you might have to transition out of your current job. You have to do 9 and 10 at some level in parallel, right? If you have to decide on what next. A lot of people do networking when they absolutely need it, but that's the wrong way to approach networking. You should be doing networking when you actually don't need it, which means that the moment you get some flavor of this, you shamelessly start pinging people on LinkedIn with a very clear thing on what you're going to provide to them. Because a lot of people, want value, but they're not able to provide value. If you want to meet a founder, or if you want to, let's say, for example, you want to get into payments as an industry, you want to build and let's say today you are in some other industry. If you want to go talk to the smartest people in Razorpay, in phone pay, in payu, what is it that they have? A lot of people, by the way, will meet you without agenda, but when you ping them, they're also getting pinged by hundreds of people, right? The smartest people there. It is always important for you to personalize that particular invitation on LinkedIn. And two, it is also important for you to offer something to them rather than what is it for you, right? A lot of people go into networking in what is it for me. The only way to do networking is when you don't need it and with what is in it for them. And you have to do that extra effort to actually make sure that you are giving them some suggestions, you're giving them some kind of help for free, right? So that this all pans out much later. Have those conversations, because a lot of you may be also on the extrovert introvert scale, more introverted, and you think that some of these no agenda conversations you don't know how to do. Start with the first three, then get on to the next 10, and after a while it will become second, second behavior for you. I used to be extremely poor in networking in the first 10 years of my career. I just, unless I had a very clear agenda, I just could not do those conversations. I think the moment you become a founder and the moment you sort of manage bigger teams, it becomes second nature for you to actually be able to network, get a lot of, sort of information and sort of pass it to your teams. The last part, of course, is finalization of the decision. The commit phase and the experience phase is always tough. And the whole idea of this exercise is you understand your personality traits, you do your Ikigai and understand what is it that you want to do. And third, you also map out your career in a way that you can actually get to that next step. So this is again sort of a set of thoughts. The way version 2 of this, which hopefully will happen in the next quarter, is to arrive at a very clear, sort of a framework or a tool by which you can do this, or a good part of this outside of maybe having a one-on-one session. The way this was also drafted is I had done approximately 40 conversations in Q1 to arrive at how this all pans out. And even today, even last week, I was having conversations. Every week there are at least 2 3 people in the startup ecosystem who sort of ping me. So this has obviously had a lot of richness of a variety, feedback from people who sort of I go through this with on a personal basis, who are able to sort of contribute back saying that okay, this is useful or this is not useful. So I will leave you with that this is sort of your anchor slide on how you start filling personality traits. As I said, you can go do your own research. It's not we have an assessment, but that takes far more time. I will send the feedback link as well as the video recording of this session. I For I know we are 5 minutes over time, but we have 10 more minutes because we started at 4:15. So for anyone who has questions, please feel free to just come on video and ask a question. Okay, so there's one on private chat, which is does it make sense to maximize on your strengths and primary personalities, or to bridge or work on your weak personality traits? Can both happen together? What does your experience say? This is a fantastic question, right? And this is a question that a lot of founders ask me. Is it important to sort of maximize on someone's strengths, whether that's the Ikigai framework or the personality traits, or is it more important to actually plug the gaps? uh, I would say it depends a lot on what is the extent of the gap and what is the role that you're doing. If, for example, you're right now an individual contributor, I would say just go maximize your strength, right? If you're young enough in your career, I think it's important for you to just maximize your strength and show that extremely distinctive value as an individual, because today the marketplace is very crowded otherwise, right? Maybe you're a coder, maybe you're a salesperson, maybe you're a creative person, doesn't matter. As you grow in your career, as you gain experiences, the more you're specific, the more you're stronger on a specific thing, the more your fall point is going to come to the fore. The Just be open for feedback. Just be open for feedback in terms of what is stopping your success or moving to the next level. And there will be points where you will take that feedback and you will have to start making sure that some of those don't become such big holes in your professional life that you're not able to either progress to the next stage, or there's a lot of hindrance in your own goals because of your fall point on a particular aspect. Use those points to make sure that you're, from, let's say, below pass mark, you're at least getting into a 50 to 60 on that particular axis, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult. It doesn't mean that you have to get that particular axis to a 80 or a 90, because by getting that to an 80 or a 90, you're probably going to compromise on your strength. For example, sensor and intuitor, I'll just give examples, right? The more you're intuitor, the less you are sensors. It's just a natural thing. Unless you're an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs, where today they can also dream, of sending something to Mars and also get to the next level detail on writing the code for what that rocket should be or something, right? It comes with a lot of success, a lot of experience, and a lot of perspective that you're able to actually move muscles on two polar opposite attributes. I would say the more you're in your 30s, in your 20s, I would say just maximize on your strengths. In your 30s, make sure that you're fixing things at least to a level that you're not having fall points, or surround yourself with people who will take care of some of that, right? So that they will always catch you in your fall points. By the time if you're 40s, if you're able to sort of move your muscles on a variety of stuff, it is possible for you to, be extremely strong on your strengths, at the same time also plug your gaps on weakness. Personally, for example, I think I started as an intuitor comma thinker, and I, at least in my 20s, I was a lot on intuitor comma thinker. I used to be a sensor when I was coding myself, but I used to have this big problem of translating ideas to action. In my 30s, in the entrepreneurial experience, there have been many times where I have failed also, but I became a feeler and a sensor additionally to my intuitor and thinker. Today, I would say at my 40s, while my intuitor and thinker are extremely strong, have a very strong feeler also, be able to engage people and rally people around me, as well as have a sensor where even if I'm weak on sensor still, I at least have people around me that push me and make sure that I move that muscle of myself. I probably will always be at that level. I would love to move my sensor even more than what it is today. For example, doing this workshop within 24 hours of actually moving my own sensor muscle. This has been an idea for probably around 3 months. And finally, yesterday, I got this 1 hour thing. I said, I have to do it today. So I don't think earlier I would have done that. So I think it is possible to make sure that as you age and as you go through different experiences, you fix things that should not become loopholes. I think there's one more question here, which is there any test that can gauge the personality traits? See, the MBTI is sort of, I would say, a poor adaptation of the same thing, right? The MBTI is a very far more popular framework, and while the MBTI is useful in its own way, I would say, but unfortunately, this is actually the original Carl Jung framework. The MBTI is sort of, I would say, an adaptation of it. Unfortunately, I've not seen a good enough test on this. So one of my things, I've actually personally created a test on this. And by the way, there are tests, there are paid tests, I'm sure, which do this job well. The disc, there is one called disc, which is also an adaptation of this. Uh, and there are paid tests for this. For example, the Jordan Peterson personality assessment, which is a slightly different axis, is also a version of the same personality traits. Each of these are slightly, slightly different, right? So you could take that. I think that's some $8-9. Disc also, I think there is a version. MBTI, there's a 16 personality, 16personalities.com. So each of these will give you different flavors. This particular one, I haven't, I mean, there is a New Zealand academy that does it, but it's very expensive. Uh, I have one which we have created, and I'm probably going to be putting it out sometime in the next 3 months. Whenever, if you're on my LinkedIn, you will see that any which way. Any other questions? Happy to address. We have 4 more minutes. Yeah.
Hi. Hi, my name is Karthik. Thanks for doing this, by the way. And my question is around career risks, right? What's your take essentially on taking a role that is very, very interesting to you, that will perhaps definitely add a certain dimension to one of your core interests, but is maybe a step down in terms of compensation as well as in terms of how tactical the role is? I'm 30, I have 7 years of work experience in startups. I've done strategic roles, but this particular role that I'm looking at is a lot more hands-on and tactical. In the long run, does that matter? Like, what's your take on that?
I think, if you're having a naturally upward career swing, and if you're at one point in time there, wanting to do something which is slightly differential on either the pay or the level or the role. For example, if you're, let's say, if you're for example, someone who wants to move from the operator ecosystem in a startup to a VC ecosystem, they will have to take one level of role difference, right? And it's possible that you do it across. For example, you're doing a great career, you want to join a McKinsey, you're going to come in at the start in a McKinsey. You're not going to, even if you have 5-7 years. I think you could justify this the more you have conviction on some axis. For example, you really have very strong conviction on the particular leader or the particular company or the particular sector. That immediately justifies that you're going to take a short-term thing, because a lot of people, let's say it's a 20% decrease or a 20. See, if you're talking anything south of a 50% decrease, you'll have to really evaluate whether, your lifestyle allows for this and stuff. And that's a tougher call. If it's a 20% decrease, right? A lot of people actually overweigh it too much, because at the end of the day, over a 5, 7, 10 year career, a 20% difference is extremely easy to, fix off, right? And honestly, at the end of the day, I think this is where no left-brained framework will ever be able to help you, because at the end of the day, there is that gut, there is that intuition call that you're taking on something, that this industry is going to be big, or this particular person you're working with has some immense potential. At the end of the day, whatever decision it is a right decision because it's your decision. And don't go do that 2 years later thing if it doesn't work out, because it at least gave you one more data point on one more journey in your career map, right? So a lot of people start, oh shit, it didn't work out, right? That's not the way to look at it, right? It would have landed you somewhere, it would have made you aware of something. The moment you reframe your thought process post that experience, whether that succeeds or fails, because there's a statistical chance only that some of it is succeed, right? And that statistical chance is usually in the low teens. It's not in the high, greater than 50. As much as by intent you want it to be 80%, it probably is a 10% chance it will succeed. So don't hold yourself, don't beat yourself too much there, because you at least got whatever. If the person that you wanted to work with turned out to be an absolute jerk, or the industry just went down, fine. At least those are learnings. You will not do some of those, or you will not give yourself enough weightage on some of those decisions next time.
Got it. Thanks, Raji. Thanks a lot.
Well, there was one more question. At 40, will this be judicious to plan career changes? There's a question again on the chat. It is trickier, I'll be honest, especially in a market like this. In India, people, unfortunately, beyond 50s, though, they'll only get you on board for something which you have done for the last 10 years. Otherwise, they won't. In your 40s, that already starts. I don't know. Maybe because I've been a founder, I could have gone to Karan Johar and tried my hand at writing some script for him. I don't know. But after being in the startup ecosystem, but the question is for yourself whether, fine, if you have either the financial leverage or whether the ecosystem leverage to do something for a couple of years and then come back. Absolutely, I think you should do it, right? Because again, regret minimization is the only hat I would wear there, right? Because the more at 50s, if that regret is going to come with you to your deathbed, it's not worth it. You would rather just do it in your 40s. You can't do it in your 50s. It becomes tougher every decade, right? But outside of that, do you want to play to your strengths? You probably should. One more question on how do you justify career breaks. See, it based on again your background and based on your leverage on a variety of fronts, it's easier to justify. For me personally, between Urban Ladder and Antler, it was extremely easy to justify even a 12, 18-month career break, right? For someone in between jobs in their 20s, it becomes tougher. People use either health or family as a reason. For example, today people are far more open to sharing about mental health challenges. People have been too stressed, or there are absolutely possible reasons on why people have to take a mental health break, right? So I think it just depends on how authentic you are. I would rather that if you're taking a break, and I very strongly believe that every 10 years, every single professional should take a 6-month break. Even if they're in a very happy career, they should take a 6-month break some point there, to make sure that they just take a step back, right? Every 5 years, I would say you should take a 3-month break, in terms of and I think it is becoming more commonplace as people are okay in much lesser loyalties, that people are okay in more remote culture. As the younger workforce comes in, this is the only way the younger workforce is going to operate. They need breaks, they need freedom of their time. No longer is that 80 hour for 20 years to make enough money. That whole nonsense is gone, and I think it's going, and it's good that it's going. I think you will be able to justify more the younger you are, because that's just the way the workforce right now comes. At the end of the day, I think it's about how authentic and how thought through you are to make that break and tell that story, is how easy it is for you to justify it. um, how does one use this framework to towards the later stage of the career? It is a tougher answer, I think. Mohit, I'm going to come to your question in a bit. It is a this is suited more for the 30s and the 40s person, best for the 20s person. But it is tougher, honestly, as a framework. The later you are, the judgment of who you are or what you are is also higher, unfortunately. So it is by inherent nature tougher to actually be able to do this the later you are. I think we've crossed the time. Arvind, one last question from you.
Hey, Rajiv, hi from Chennai. So, Rajiv, the fundamental of all the framework, right? Whatever you said about the triangle or this Jack Ma's or Jeff Bezos, right? All fundamentally relies on self-awareness, right? Like how aware are you? Only then come over there, right? So, how do you do, or what do you do to improve your, quotient in the self-awareness skill?
Great question. It's a great question, actually, and absolutely with you. I think I probably didn't say it, and it's a great point you made, which is, I think, at the end of the day, all of this becomes super simple if your self awareness is very high. The best answer is to become a founder. You're so beaten to death, by everyone around you, everything from investors to employees to co-founders to team members to the ecosystem to customers, that self-awareness automatically increases. Otherwise, I would say just be absolutely anal about asking for feedback from people around, and make feedback a culture of the way you grow. A lot of people, especially in our country, do not have this culture of open feedback, either giving feedback or taking feedback. They think as if someone is attacking them, right? And that's because we're not used to. It's just a very endemic sort of a cultural challenge. I would say add that into your every month, every quarter, every 6 months, the people, the 6 7 people around you, it could be peers, it could be people that report to you, of course it's your managerial feedback anyway comes. It doesn't, it's a part of anyway everything. I would say if you can add that as part of your toolkit, that you're going to send a form, you anonymize it, and if people are not comfortable, you anonymize it, or you say that, hey, I really want it, and very pointed question: what is the one thing that I am doing really well? What is the one thing that I really have to improve? That's it. Not like some generic. Because people also do the shit sandwich, right? People say something great, they put the bad thing or the improvement thing in the middle. They say something great, and in that whole thing you miss the middle thing. So have very pointed questions, make it part of the way that you work. It doesn't matter if the company you're part of has that culture or not. You make it your own individual toolkit. I think that's the only way to increase self-awareness. The more you do it, the better you get at it, and I think in surprisingly in 3 4 years you would become one of the top in the game there, because it's so nascent.
Awesome. Thank you, Rajiv.
Sure. Mohit, do you have a question, Mohit? If not, no worries.
Sure. Yes. Hi, Rajiv. Hi from Gurgaon. So I wanted to talk about career transitions, right? So how do you build that leverage? Let's say when you're making a transition from product management to, let's say, a venture capitalist job.
So this is once again, I think you have to first understand any new sector, any new function, whatever it is, what is the success, the most successful people in that industry, what are the skill sets they have, right? And there is a bunch of research you can do by talking to those people. You list down, okay, either in terms of functional skill sets, okay, for example, financial modeling or assessing founders or whatever, or behavioral skill sets in terms of networking, in terms of some other thing, right? Patience, because you need to wait for results. If you're an operator versus if you're an investor, you have a much longer time frame in which your results are going to come. So you just need patience, right? So whatever are the functional and the behavioral skill sets that you feel based on conversations are the important for the success of that, how would you rate on that? Okay. Now, if you rate very high automatically, I think the transition becomes more natural. If you rate very low on that, you have to now figure out this, this is journey, right? You want to land up in, let's say, the Swiss Alps and you're sitting in India. You can't take an aeroplane. But if you're it's easy, you can take an aeroplane, but now you only can take a car, let's say, because the gap is very high. Now, how do you go through the deserts of Arabia? Do you go through the mountains of the Himalayas, or do you go through some underground path? I think that is the whole point that you'll have to do. So you'll have to map out as to, okay, there's a higher chance of me landing in VC from being a product manager if I go to an earlier stage startup. And let's say you're a product manager in a big company today. So you sort of map that out to say, I will go to an earlier stage and then I'll go to VC. For example, it could be as simple as just writing a blog on early stage product. Let's say you want to just give a lot of gyan on healthcare products, on financial products, on some other products to show width of industry, right? So whatever it is so whatever is the path you draw out, maybe there are 3, 4 paths. Maybe one path is to do an MBA and do something. One path is to write a blog and widen your exposure on a variety of sectors. One path is to become a founder, right? Whatever are those paths, then you evaluate your probability of which paths might make sense for you, where you are, right? And then you sort of choose that path. Again, it doesn't mean that you're going to land up at the end destination. It just makes, all of these are just probabilities, right, at the end of the day. So you choose a path and then you get to that particular end outcome. For all you know, you just ping a VC and they're so impressed with what you already are and you just get that. That is also possible. So that is also a path, right? You just go crazy networking, you just talk to people, you just spread the word, you're out there, VC is your thing, whatever it is, right? So I would just say at the end of the day, it's again like drawing this map out, right? I mean, you can go to a particular location through any of the 5 routes. You just pick the route that you are most enthused about.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay, we are at the 20 mark. One last question, anyone, and we'll end the session right after that. Okay, awesome. There are no other questions. That's great. I'm going to send all of you the video link for those who joined late. And I'll also send you a feedback form. The idea of the feedback form is to sort of make this session better the next time. So please please be honest in your feedback. That's what's most important. Thank you once again for spending your Saturday evening on this, and hope this was useful in a small way to your own careers. Bye-bye.
It was. Thanks, Rajiv. Thanks a lot.